Strategies for Parents, presented by Lisa Pfeiffer and Jean Veraska. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lisa Pfeiffer. I'm a Fairfax County school psychologist. I'm a parent of a third grader, and I am a participant in my local PTA. And I've also authored workbooks in the area of school psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy.
Hi, I'm Jean Veraska. I'm a Fairfax County Public Schools social worker, and I'm also a parent of both a second grader and a fourth grader. I'm a trainer of youth mental health first aid and teen mental health first aid, and I have my certification in the science of well-being. We're very delighted to have the opportunity to present with you today.
So first, we're going to start with one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Fred Rogers, because he speaks upon building the social emotional capacities of children and people and making our interactions with each other meaningful. So anything that is human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people that we trust in this important talk can help us know that we are not alone. So today we're going to provide some strategies and some ideas to help facilitate, emotional communication at home, rebuilding our connections with each other, and just some strategies that can carry over at home.
And we're definitely going to be focusing on strategies so that you can watch this presentation and be able to implement things immediately in the home.
So first, we'll just provide a simple understanding of what social emotional learning is. It's a large concept, and we integrate it within our schools. And there are several examples that we'll provide later that parents are naturally doing in supporting the growth of our kids. So CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, defines social emotional learning as the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And this is the graphic model of the CASEL components, which shows that there are 5 key components of social emotional learning that we extend within our classrooms, show example and strategies through our schools, then our very important stakeholders of families and caregivers and how they naturally influence and model and support these skills, and then opportunities in our community to support, enhance the social emotional capacities of our kids. And just to briefly go through these, self-awareness is the understanding of emotions. Self-management is being able to take those emotions, identify their intensity, and then engage in strategies to make those emotions more manageable. Responsible decision-making is goal setting, initiating, setting goals and going after them. Relationship skills, it's just what it is. It's being able to interact with each other in meaningful and positive ways. And then social awareness is learning to understand the importance of nonverbal skills, perspective taking, empathy, being able to connect in healthy partnerships and engage in learning practices.
So all of this is based in research, and we know from the research that when we have increased emotional abilities, that we, and in our families and at school and in our communities, that we are better able to engage in conversation in our interactions with others. We are less likely to make decisions that can be harmful to ourselves and others, and that our mental health can actually benefit from our social and emotional increase in skills. In that way, we have more empathy skills, we have better quality relationships, we have better communication, and we're more likely to take on leadership skills, and we're more likely to be academically successful. So, what are emotions? It's really important to understand them, be able to name them, identify them, and have a vocabulary for them in order to be able to talk about them and be able to engage in social emotional learning. So, feelings are something that we all experience. They're okay, and it's natural. It is something that we're born with, and it is something that we all experience. It is also something that is subjective, and it is something for each of us to experience on our own. So when somebody says that they're sad, they're sad. Even if the same experience wouldn't have made you sad, it doesn't matter. If they're experiencing sadness, that's what they're experiencing. And we have to remember that with our children, something that is making them sad is it's all in reference. And so it could be that, you know, them missing out on prom is very sad. Whereas you're thinking, well, that's not a big deal. Well, it's not a big deal because you've already had that experience possibly, or you don't worry about that experience anymore because it happened possibly 20 years ago and it was not something you were interested in. But we have to remember it's all about where they are developmentally, what they're going through, what they've experienced in the past. All of those things are a reference for how we're feeling. So it's important that we take it seriously when our students talk about their feelings and that we validate them, that we recognize that it is relevant to what they're experiencing, and that the intensity is also where they are with their stress and with their assessment. And all of that goes into what Lisa was talking about earlier with also teaching them about how we best learn how to manage them and make decisions around them. And as they learn those skills, they'll also learn better how to negotiate all of these emotions. But what they are feeling is what they are feeling. And it can depend how long they feel that based on how they are learning to negotiate their feelings. And those feelings, as Lisa's about to talk about, are definitely connected to their thoughts and actions. And I'll let her talk about that more in just a second. The other thing that can also influence how we're feeling about things is when we pick up on microaggressions. And that's around when somebody might be talking with us, but we're seeing that their facial expressions or their body language is giving off something different than what they might be expressing verbally. And so we're trying to reconcile that and we're trying to make sense of that. And so sometimes that's when our gut reaction comes in and we're really trying to make sense of what's happening. And that's when we really need to listen to our children and say, what are they experiencing and what are they feeling? Even though they might be told one thing, they might be feeling another way, and we need to take that seriously. And with that, I will let Lisa get more into how our feelings are connected to our thoughts and actions.
So I share a graphic similar to this quite often in trainings and school buildings, because what it shows is often we notice the behavior of a child, because it's outward. It's if they're really upset, it might be intense. But what really that behavior is the child trying to communicate a feeling that they might not be able to identify. They might be, triggered by something that they're not quite able to express through words. So oftentimes it comes out as actions. And so to support this, we want to, increase a child's ability to identify emotions, just generally identify emotions in themselves, and then identify emotions among others. And those feelings are also connected with self-talk. And self-talk is obviously something very personal to themselves. And what we want to do is to identify any of those negative self-statements, those ones that are kind of leading us off course, and promote that positive mindset that while a situation might be challenging and your feelings are absolutely valid, there are ways to problem solve. There's people to support you, that it's not just a fixed outcome. The positive attitudes are connected with that growth mindset, that we might not be able to do it now, but we may be able to do it in the future, or next time we can try something different and be more successful or supported, and kind of building up that positive self-talk and that inner belief in themselves that when a challenge comes, my behavior doesn't have to be shutting down or escaping. My behavior might be trying to regulate trying to problem solve, trying to seek help when there's a problem. I'm trying to make that a bit more manageable. So, all right. So we're going to discuss some ways to support emotional language at home. Two of our key components here are two resources that are really helpful. One would be Komochis, which is a social emotional programming that provides these happy little characters and a meaningful way to discuss expression of feelings, identifying feelings, and kind of promoting that emotional language in a less stressful way. Jean, would you mind introducing the ruler concept?
Sure. So as you can see, there's Mark Brackett here in this icon, and he's always talking about if you can name it, you can tame it. That whole idea, if you have vocabulary for it, that you can then make sense of it. But he is the founder of Ruler, which is recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate. And that is a program that is founded out by Mark Brackett out of the Ruler, out of Yale's Center for Emotional Intelligence. And that is another program that we've also been using in Fairfax County Public Schools, and we'll be using parts of that as we talk today through our strategies.
And these are just two examples of programming that is integrated in our schools, but you'll find within different communities or different schools, we have a variety of programs that meet the needs of the schools to help build our emotional capacities of all of our students. So the same program might not work for a middle school population or elementary population. We try to match that program to the the needs and the strengths of the school. And as families, as parents, modeling ourselves that I feel, or when a situation comes about, using that feeling language. Whereas, adults might read each other in a situation, children can benefit kind of from that explicit instruction that in identifying how feelings are connected to situations or different experiences are felt. So some examples of social emotional skills at home, I'm sure you see these throughout the day, but sometimes they just become routine, and you're not like, oh wow, that we've really seen some social emotional growth. So I mean, these are simple ways, but when families feel safe to identify their feelings and communicate them, that I feel, or even when upset, like you made me feel this certain way in a situation, building that that trust in each other, that even if you let me down in that moment, I can express that, and then we can move on from there. Using a respectful tone with communicating, knowing that our nonverbals are just as powerful as our words. So that the volume of your voice, the tone of your voice, how relaxed your body is in communicating. If you're angry and you're tense, that might provide a little more feedback. You need to just take a break before you address an issue, for kids or for adults. Listening to others' opinions, that I might view a problem differently than Jean. We might have different ideas, and respecting those ideas. Asking for help, encouraging our kids to ask for help. I see that you're frustrated, and getting them to advocate for themselves. It's also evident when kids start following their own routines, like you've set chore charts or daily schedules or even bedtime routines, and all of a sudden, they're packing up all their school supplies, or when they come home, they're emptying their lunch boxes and putting things away, and just helping the flow of the house. That's also a good example of social emotional skills. And then also just taking a break when you're upset. I mean, life is stressful. Definitely the last year has taught us some that we can handle some major hurdles, but sometimes we all need a moment. So when your kids take a moment, that's okay, and then come back to talk about whatever's going on. is definitely a positive example of a social emotional growth at home.
Yes, and just to add to that, also, being able to say, I'm sorry, and I made a mistake, those are huge for children to learn that it's okay to make a mistake. And it's really important to be able to say, I'm sorry, and take responsibility for that in order to learn how to grow from that. So one way that we can also build a vocabulary around this is, so one of the things that Mark Brackett with Ruler talks about is that there's no good or bad emotions. We really shouldn't be talking about them as negative or positive, because all emotions are just emotions. And when we're angry, that doesn't have to equate to being bad or negative. It could be that when we're angry, we are advocates for others, and that we debate really well, and that our opinion matters, and that we go out and we make social change happen. So anger can be a really powerful and empowering emotion and enable us to do great things. Just like when we're kind of down and blue, we're really empathetic with others. We really have that time where we're reflective and we think about others, and we think about what makes a difference to others and how we might make change. And so every emotion comes with it the ability to see in it how we can be part of a bigger community and how we can socialize with it. So Mark Brackett is really good at helping us see how all emotions are about energy and pleasantness. So one way that you can start to talk about emotions is, where do we see emotions fitting? Are they low energy, high pleasantness? Are they high pleasantness? Are they low pleasantness, high energy? Are they high energy, high pleasantness? And then start to kind of, as you start to have words that you identify, where do they fit? And so here's an example of that, where we have list. There's a low energy, low pleasantness list, a high energy, low pleasantness list, a high energy, high pleasantness list, and a low energy, high pleasantness list. And each list, as a family, it was agreed on what words go on each list. And so they were listed on there as the family grew their vocabulary. And if a word came up that they weren't sure what it meant, they looked it up in the dictionary or on their phone and Google or whatever it was, but they figured out what the definition of it was, and then talked about, where do we think as a family this word fits? Which category? And this list, since this picture has been taken, this list has grown. And so this is one way to increase the emotional vocabulary. The fifth list, all the way to the right here, are the strategies that this family is working on coming up with. So they have things over here like strategies that they can use to shift from one feeling to another is humor or play or get a hug or take a deep breath. And again, this list has also grown to include taking a bath and getting outside and doing some exercise and things like that. So this is just one example, again, of how you can grow that emotional vocabulary and also include strategies with it. So now we're going to talk about creating feeling agreements at home. Again, this is directly from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. This is the work of Mark Brackett. He does this both in schools and with families, and he also does it with corporations. This is work to help create a safe environment, a safe emotional environment for families or corporations or schools. So we always work on, what are the rules? What are the ways that we are going to protect ourselves physically with safety? But we don't always take the time to figure out, what is it that we need to create emotional safety in our family. And so we're going to talk through what it is that you can do to begin to work on creating a feeling agreement to create emotional safety in your home. This has been done. I have done these agreements with all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. So just so you know, it can be done with all ages, and it can be done in lots of different ways, and it can be done in lots of ways that are very fun. In some families, there's agreement right away. This whole exercise only takes about an hour. In other families, I have seen this take several days to get through. So just so you know, wherever you are as a family, it's okay. And just know that, putting the commitment into it and really figuring out what you need to feel emotionally safe in your home is what's the most important. So what you're going to do when you create family agreements is you're going to focus on 3 primary questions. How do we want to feel in this family? Not all the feelings. Of course, we could go on and on and on about so many feelings, but what are the real primary ones? What are the 3 to 5 feelings that are most important to us as a family? And that's where families can really spend a lot of time. Some families know right away, everybody's in agreement. We have these 4 feelings that we as a family agree on, and that's what we want. Other families really struggle, and one member wants a certain 3 feelings, another family member wants another 3 feelings, and so we really have to give the family time to talk through that. Once they do decide on how they want to feel, we have to make those feelings measurable, right? It can't just be like, we're going to be happy because we're going to be happy. Well, what does happy mean to this family? What does that look like? What is it? How do we know that we're achieving that? And right, so if I just say we're going to be happy, then I have no way of actually knowing that this family is actually happy unless I actually sit down and we as a family talk about what is happiness going to actually look like? What is it going to feel like? What is everybody going to be experiencing with that happiness? And then what are we going to do about it? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable when it's not happening? Because the truth of the matter is if we make this great family agreement and then at the end of the day, we're not actually accountable to it. We're not actually like, it's okay for everybody to just break it. Well, then we haven't created emotional safety. We're not actually living what it is that we said we wanted to do. So it's really important that we also answer, what are we going to do when we're not feeling these feelings? So in order to do this, we also have to understand what the difference is between family agreements and house rules, right? So house rules are these are set by the parents. This is when the parents make the rules. There's no debating this. The parents say, we don't put our hands in the light socket. We're going to be home by a certain curfew time. We're going to get our homework done. We're going to sit down as a family and eat dinner at this time. We're going to not jump off, off the railings in the house. We're not going to run through the house. We're not going to use knives to try and threaten our siblings, right? These are the things that maintain order, they maintain safety, they let us know that our kids are following some routines. They are the things that the parents have the ultimate right to decide on and make happen. And the parents are being parents. Family agreements are what we all take an equal stake in. We are all equal stakeholders to decide, how do we want to feel? And it's important that everybody has equal say and everybody has a voice in the process. And so it's really important that you're sitting down and really listening to everybody and everybody's feeling heard. So in order to do this, you're going to really take some time to have everybody list out what are the 3 emotions that they want to feel in their home. And again, this can be done at all ages. And so a 5-year-old might have very different feelings than the adults in the home versus the 16-year-old in the home. So, again, it depends on your home and your dynamics as to what this might look like, but it can be done. So as a family, once you have your 3, everybody has their 3 words, you bring them to the table. And then you're going to see, where do we have similar words, right? I suggest putting them on pieces of paper so that you can move them around. And so do we have words like happy and excited and words that we can kind of group together? And do we have words like reflective and contemplative that we could group together? Do we have words like supported and valued that we could group together? So first of all, do we have groupings and do we agree on those groupings? If we have that, like, does it come down to 3 to 5 groupings? Then maybe we're able to, as a family, kind of talk through it and figure out which word do we want out of those groupings? Or was there one word that seemed to come up quite often, and can we agree that that might be the word? So that's the first thing you're going to go through. You're going to go through that process of kind of, what words do we have here and what words as a family are we going to agree on? And then you're going to go through that process of making them measurable. So when it says that as a family, we want to feel supported. What does that look like? Is supported that everybody's doing their chores without being asked? Is supported that in the morning people are going to say, how are you doing? And is there anything that I can do to help make your day successful? Is supported that at the end of the night that everybody, takes 15 minutes to just go and have some downtime and do their own thing, and then they come back together to have like a little family meeting? It's up to you and your family what that looks like. Is happy. One person in the family might not be a smiler, might not be a hello person, right? So is happy going to be a hello and a hi, or is happy going to be that we're all, helping each other out? And is happy going to be that we're simply saying good morning to everyone? What is that going to be for this family that works for everyone, not just a few people, or not just because this is what one person thinks that it should look like, right? So really figuring out, what does that, when you were thinking of that word, what were you thinking that it looked like? What were you thinking that it was going to really be? And then again, when this does not happen, is it that if I feel that I'm not emotionally safe right now and we're not living up to our charter, is it that I'm going to simply say something to that person? I'm not feeling that we're living up to the agreements that we made right now. Or is it that I feel that we need to call a family meeting and we all need to talk about, it seems to me that the agreements aren't being lived up to right now? Or is it that we need to say that we, every 3 months we're going to check in with it, and we're okay with waiting 3 months to address the problem while maybe somebody is suffering in silence? These, again, are things that you need to, as a family, decide, how is it that we're going to come back and make sure that people are accountable to it, and we're creating emotional safety in our home that we're all accountable to. So these are the important things that you'll need to be answering. So here's an example of what it means to make a feeling word into measurable. So an example of respected: allow everyone to voice their opinion. And an example of encouraged: help others when they are having trouble. And here's an example of what you could do when the agreements aren't being lived up to. When someone is upset, ask how I can help. Apologize when you make a mistake, or request help.
Okay. So over the last year, we have really had a reflection on managing things that we can control versus the millions of factors that suddenly slipped out of our hands. And as we are adjusting now back to re-entering school, getting back to work, establishing new routines, there are new things that we can control and still many things that we cannot control. So as we navigate through these family agreements and house rules and supporting social emotional wellness at home, one of the most important things is keeping that focus on what we can do at home, or as individuals, right? So as a parent or as a child, I know I can control what rules I follow. As a parent, I know I can control, the volume of my voice when I get upset when something happens. Just speaking from personal experience. Also, I can control, how much news I watch, how many articles I read about something that might have an emotional impact on myself. I know I can control the amount of gratitude I show for other people in my household, contributing to chores or making dinner or just making an effort to have conversations. There's other things that we don't have control over: other people's thoughts, other people's actions, whether or not Costco has, toilet paper on shelves, how long, certain restrictions are going to last, when will we get back to normal? These are things we can't control, but we can take kind of solace in the moment of those items that we can control to, help support emotional wellness. All right. So I really like to talk about kind of the window of tolerance when it comes to stress, and it's not just one or the other. It's a range. So in any moment, we can kind of slide one way or the other. So an example I like to say is, on Monday when you go to work, your window of tolerance is, pretty wide open, right? Things are just right. You kind of had a few days to refresh and you get back to work and you open your email and, you're setting goals for the week. Maybe you're focused. You're able to collaborate with others. And as the stress of the week uh, grows on you, that window starts to shut a little bit. And when the window shuts, our zone of regulation can shift. We can be overly regulated, where you're easily triggered. You might have more intense emotions, where you might get upset over something going on. You might have physical reactions or physical distress. Or when stress hits and the window is shut, you might have hyporegulation, which is kind of your shutdown behavior. You're frozen. You're not quite sure what to do. You can't get anything done. And we see this in the classroom, and it kind of ties back to that iceberg from the very beginning, where often we just notice the behavior, but what it really is maybe a child shifting from their ability to handle stress in that situation. And it's definitely a personal experience. It's not just, well, if this situation, you should be able to do it just right. There are many factors. It could be physical factors like sleep, or they're hungry. It could be other, relationship issues with their peers or their partners, or or a fight at home before you got to school. These things can all help, or can all influence, a person's ability to regulate. So what are ways that we can support regulation at home? First is co-regulation. I mean, co-regulation starts when our kids are tiny babies. We are modeling, and our kids pick up on that. But I noticed, even when the pandemic started, I needed to kind of refresh and think of ways to support co-regulation again. And one of them is my semi-chaotic meal menu that's on the side. All of a sudden now, we were planning for 3 meals a day, and we needed to know when it was or who was going to support making it, and kind of just creating the routines to provide some kind of structure in a really kind of unpredictable setting. And so that was adults doing the work with that to help children feel more able to, regulate what was going on. I had to create spaces for work and play. Had to make sure, the animals were one room, the children are in one room learning, parents are able to do their work in their spaces. Also, those coping choices, like Gina shared, that those strategy lists, that sometimes we need to give a visual support, because they might know the tools, but in that moment when you're either overly upset or kind of frozen, sometimes a cue can help you, like, okay, these are the strategies that we use in our family. I feel safe using these strategies. If I do one of these, then I might be able to shift into a better headspace to be able to problem solve. And then eventually that co-regulation moves over to independence and that self-regulation, where adults and kids are able to communicate their feelings, a range of feelings, not just I'm okay, or I'm bored, or I'm happy. We're able to use much more descriptive words to communicate what's going on. They're able to reflect on that intensity of those feelings, or the stress that they're feeling, that it's not just an all or nothing. It's not just, there's no stress, I'm totally calm and cool, or I'm 5, completely enraged, losing my mind, upset. There's a range that you could be, at a level 3, where it's like things are starting to get, I notice things are getting more intense, and maybe I need to take a step away. And then just supporting each other, whether it's kids reaching out, hey mom, I noticed, you're having a hard day, and maybe they unload the dishwasher, or they walk the dog, or they feed the dog without being asked to do it. That is, just a small step, but it's such a, a major reflection that they're understanding others' emotions, and then, just working with the family.
So to piggyback on what Lisa's saying, we all have that moment as parents when it's just really rough, right? So maybe you haven't had this exact moment, but a moment that's similar, that moment when all of a sudden you realize you're running out of time and you need to get out of the door because you have to get to whatever it is, whatever appointment or obligation that you need to get to. And you need to also be the parent who gets the children in their shoes and in their jackets and out the door. And you only have about 10 minutes. And you look over and you see that one child has put their lamp inside of the sleeping bag and it's starting to burn at the same time that the other child has decided that they were going to water paint on your nice wall. And so the world seems like it is definitely panic induced because you just need to get out of the house. You need them to have their shoes on and you need them to have their jacket on. And there's paint all over the wall and there's potentially a fire that's about to happen. And there's this moment where you're like, I can't do this, right? And so what Lisa's talking about, that's might be when you're at your 5 and it's just about to explode. And so one of the ways that you can kind of help to refocus, and it doesn't mean we all have our moments. We all have that time when we're like, I didn't do it so well. I did not handle it as well as I could. I was not as emotionally regulated as I could have been. And that's okay, because what we do in those moments is that afterwards we can debrief with our kids and we can let them know that we're all human and that we had a moment and what we could have done better. But if we are able to take that moment and say, okay, I need to regulate right now, one way that we can do that is that if we kind of remember what the big picture is, what's the goal for my family? My goal is to remind my kids that when all the chaos is going on, that I love them and that we're safe. And that what really needs to happen right now is that I need them to be safe. So the two things that need to be focused on are making sure that there's no fire and that my kids have their shoes on and we get out the door, right? Those are the two things. And what I value is that I can be with my family, that I have my family, that we're healthy enough to be able to be together, and that I have a home to live in and it's not burned down. And so I can save that home, right? And so how can I also be showing them respect in this moment to say, this is not okay. And maybe this is not the moment to address the exact issues because we're trying to get out the house. And I have to remember that too. Maybe it's just taking care of the issues. And then when we come home, we can have a more in-depth conversation about it. So really kind of centering myself and thinking about what's most important now. What are the goals that I want my kids to be learning right now? And what are the values? Sometimes, not always, but sometimes that can those just focusing on the big picture, focusing what is it that I want for my family can help be the questions that can come into your head and help you kind of like center, take a deep breath and kind of start to see the challenges for what they are and go from that 5 to maybe that 3, possibly a 2, and get out of the house with the shoes all on and the coats on too. So that can sometimes be the family focus that helps us.
Right. And just kind of piggybacking on that slide, it's okay to do a parent check-in so you can get to your best self. It might not be 100%, but if it's, just a little more emotionally aware. So the first question is, how frustrated are you? I mean, I picked 1 to 5. Your scale could be bigger. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of being able to quantify, somewhere between calm and furious. We need strategies to get out of that furious range, obviously. But, your feelings are valid because each of us have our own experience and different things that are going on. So not being able to find the shoes or the lamp melting the sleeping bag might be that, just the tip of the iceberg of, frustration at that moment. The next thing to look at is it an emergency? So if today's the day that we end up 20 minutes late to practice or, whatever, like just being late, is it, we don't want to be late, but is it really the end of the world in this moment that today just didn't go right? It's probably not. And it's probably something we can forgive. And then maybe later on reflect on, well, what could we have done to be able to get more on time? What behaviors can we change to get us where we need to be? But if it's not an emergency, then, just it's okay if things don't go as planned. And then what energy are you giving off? And this is what I had mentioned before, just our body language that, if we're not ready or if we're too close, we're too loud, our kids are going to freeze. They're not going to respond. They're not going to move any faster. They're not going to suddenly find their shoes. Then all of a sudden maybe they're crying. It's easy to talk about because these are things that, kind of happen in everyday life. It happens. Take a moment. It's okay. And then come back and figure out a way to get out the door and get to where you need. And some ways to help with stress. This was just a cute graphic I'd found, but, reassuring kids that, when they are upset, that it's validating their feelings. Like, you're safe. You can trust me. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to feel stressed, or whatever that emotional word that they say. It's okay. And, I've experienced that too, because sometimes our children don't think that we experienced some of these situations that they had. And providing maybe creative outlets for them to be able to kind of express how they feel or kind of shift that mindset, or even just sitting together, just being together can be really helpful and kind of physically calming for each other. And it's just a, supportive language, behaviors to show. Communication tools also help. Maybe you can, when I was talking about that feelings 1 through 5, kind of, it's quantifying it and then giving like a qualitative description of what that feels like. This is just an example. At the very bottom, that's where you want to start, that baseline. Like, I can handle this. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. You give me a task, I do it right away, or I feel calm and confident what I'm doing. And then as we move up, something is bothering me. Well, what could you do for that? Maybe, slowly count to 10. And then I can kind of figure out what to do. Or if I'm feeling nervous or identifying that I'm getting mad, hopefully we can do some coping skills before we get to that totally I feel out of control. But if you do, there are, you can build calming routines or different strategies that work for your family and identify those. Post them up on the refrigerator or in your child's room. We had, while we were virtual learning, I had a coping skills card next to my daughter's computer, along with a Komochi's chart, which you can find free resources there, just so that she had some emotional cues and then some strategy cues, just in case, things got overwhelming. So we could try to problem solve that way.
And just to add to what Lisa said, and I believe that she said this earlier, but just to reiterate it, you want to work on how you're going to cope when you're having difficulty regulating your emotion, when you're not having difficulty regulating your emotion. So when kids are calm and like you're just having a nice moment, that's the perfect time to say you were getting angry. What's a coping skill that we could work on? Or, hey, let me teach you this coping skill, because when your child is actually having trouble coping, they're not in a place where they can learn the new skill. So you want to be able to reference the skill that they've already learned. And I believe that Lisa said that earlier, but I just wanted to take the chance to reiterate that.
That was definitely a very important key, because that's when learning occurs, when you're calm and you're willing to listen or reflect and collaborate to come up with ideas to support wellness at home. And one of these strategies are building calming routines. So for a younger child, using pictures or symbols is helpful of, when you do get upset, these are some things that we could do. But practicing these in a situation, prior to like actually needing them, or using them as strategies to like set your mind right before something challenging. So, grounding is a technique to help you kind of connect with the present, by using, exploring through your senses. It doesn't take long. This example is, name 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you smell, two things you could touch or taste, and then state one positive intention. So that would be something you could do before, a child takes a test or does something challenging, or, just to start the day off. You just kind of connecting with what's going on in the moment and letting go of, some of the stress, that could be surrounding them, just kind of giving them a good start of the day. But you can do it for younger kids or older kids. So when all else fails, call a family member or a friend to support you. It's okay. So connection with others creates positive energy during these stressful times, that knowing that we're not alone, whether it's, calling a family member. I mean, I know my family members live far away, but, we've been saved through my dad writing a pen pal letter to my daughter, just trying to establish that connection. Doing, virtual coffee hour with someone that lives far away, just making sure we are connected, that while we might not be able to physically be together all the time, that, there's others within our support systems that are available and near, and, just being creative, or even just scheduling times to check in with families and friends. And I found that always to be helpful, that, we know that something's coming up. We're going to talk with the cousins, or maybe we're going to play outside with the neighbor, that there's just some little social connection to look forward to. And that does really help kind of share the burden of the stress that we may feel. And this is another simple activity. We're kind of nearing the end of our presentation, but there are many things that, despite this extremely challenging time that we've been living through, that there have been little victories. Our kids have, learned how to manage Google Slides, like first and second graders being able to access technology that they've never been able to do before. They've learned how to ride their bike. They've, had reading time with grandparents through, virtual connections, or, they've learned to bake a cake on their own. Just these little accomplishments are so important to recognize within our families. And sometimes they go off unnoticed because life moves so quickly sometimes. So writing down accomplishments or little memories that you've really enjoyed and putting them in a jar. And then, every once in a while, maybe when you're feeling down or you just want to celebrate something, open it up and read them out loud, and share with each other, noticing all of the efforts that you've made. It doesn't have to be major things. It just could be these little ones that those are the memories, that you'll, keep with you and can support you during, stressful times.
So in summary, hopefully this has been helpful in creating some information in order to understand why social emotional learning can be so helpful in the home, as well as giving some concrete examples and strategies that you can actually use at home. If you are able to use some of this at home, the research does suggest that it will help to build a more resilient home with better communication and conflict management and resolution strategies, and allow for children to become more of self-advocates, build better coping skills, and become better self-advocates. So that's what we're hoping will happen with all of this. You do have school social workers and school psychologists at all of your schools to help to support this also, and to answer any questions that you might have about this. So we highly encourage you to reach out to them for any follow-up questions. The resources that we use today are listed here. Lisa talked about CASEL and Komochi's, and we both talked about the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence Ruler Program. So all of them are available to you. And if you pause this page, you can also see the websites listed here. And many of them have free resources. And as a result, we want to say thank you for your time today. And we hope that this was helpful.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us.